Засвіт стали, означенники похід полу ночі. Заплакала Марусинька свої ясні очі. Заплакала Марусинька свої ясні очі. Не плач, Марусинька, не плач, не журися, краще за свого батька вишньому молися, краще за свого Богу помолися. Світить місяць над водою, а сонця немає. Мати сина в дороженьку слізно проводжає. Мати сина в дороженьку слізно проводжає. Іди, мій синочку, іди, не варися. За 4 неділинки додому вернися. За 4 неділинки додому вернися. Ой, хто знає, чи же вернусь, що в яку годину приймеш мою ж Марусиньку, як рідну дитину. Приймеш мою ж Марусиньку, як рідну дитину, як рідну дитину. Ой, рад би ж я Марусиньку ще раніше взяти, та чи ж будеш вона ж мене, синку, шанувати, синку, шанувати. Не плач, не плач, не журиться, хто не впадайте, заграбники, вороники, назад сподівайтесь. Ой, прилучку, прилучку, при широкім полі, при великім табуні, кінь гуляв поволі, при великім табуні, кінь гуляв поволі. Ой, піймаю, заплутаю, шовковою моздою, ой, піймаю, заплутаю, шовковою моздою. Ой, лети, мій коню, та й вихрем лисиця, проти милої двора, станом становися, проти милої двора, станом становися. Не плач, Марусинька, не плач, не журися, краще за свого милого Богу помолися, краще за свого милого вишньому молися. Без благословіння матері та батька козак ніколи не ступав і кроку. Тому шануйте батьків своїх. Де б вони не були, що б вони не робили, то не ваша справа, то ваша доля. Але батьки від Бога. І біля їхніх стіп двері до раю. Тож будьте з собою, будьте людьми, і буде у вас все гаразд. Батько нас ніколи не полишає. Козацьке слово даю.
Finlandia, Finlandia, sinne taas matkalla oli Iivana. Kun Molotovin lupasi on kaikki haroshi, huomenna jo Helsingissä syödään maroshi. Njet Molotov, valehtelit enemmän kuin itse Bobrikov. Finlandia, Mannerheimin linjalla oli vastus ankara. Kun Karjalassa alkoi hirmutulitus, loppui monen Iivanan puhepulitus. Njet Molotov, valehtelit enemmän kuin itse Bobrikov. Finlandia, sitä pelkää voittamaton puna-armeija. Ja Molotovkin sanoi, että kaikki on jortvasmi. Tsuhna aikoo käydä meitä Kraivelistakin. Njet Molotov, valehtelit enemmän kuin itse Bobrikov. Uralintaan, siellä on Molotovin torpammaa. Sinne pääsee Stalinit ja muutkin huijarit, politrukit, komissaarit ja petruskoijarit. Njet Molotov, valehtelit enemmän kuin itse Bobrikov.
Durmasın ağlarına da Sil zaman 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 bir uzak bir aman.
Hello, I hope you're all doing well. It is Thursday, 7:24 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is 4:24 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and 2:24 p.m. in the general Kiev area. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome to today's Thursday stream. We have a lot of news to go through, and most of it's international, which means I'm super obsessed with it. As a geopolitics nerd, as a geopolitics freaks in the sheets, I am excited for today's topics, especially what I'm going to call the main topic, even though we're going to spend probably no more than 10 to 15 minutes talking about it. But it should be the main topic. Even though many of you might not know who this figure is, Abdullah Öcalan, the leader of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, better known as the PKK, a designated terrorist organization according to Turkey and its ally, the United States, has released a statement after 25 years in prison, since he was in prison in 99, calling for the Kurdistan Workers' Party to put down its arms and come to peace with Turkey and come to some settlement with the government. And that they should have a meeting, and not only should the Kurdistan Workers' Party make peace with Turkey, but also they should disband, no longer exist after the settlement. Now, we're going to read about it. We're going to talk about a statement, what this means for Turkey, who Abdullah Öcalan is, what the Kurdistan Workers' Party is, and what this means for the future of Turkey, and why it also is a good sign for Syria as well, a very good sign for Syria. And it is why the Kurdish allies in Syria are reacting to this positively. You might get some ideologues who might not like this very much, but personally, I think this is a good update. But it all depends on how this opportunity is used. Just because one party wants peace, if another party isn't willing to, come to terms that will make peace, then peace might not come, as we have all found out from these negotiations, quote unquote, towards the Ukrainian peace deal. Anyway, that's going to be, I think, a really big news story tonight. But we're only going to spend 10, 15 minutes talking about it, because we haven't gotten really a PKK meeting yet to react to it, to see if they're going to disband, so we don't really even know if it's going to happen, but we at least can talk a little bit about the implications. We're also going to be talking about Trump's meeting with the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, whose ratings right now are a bit in the fucking toilet, if I'm going to be honest with you, but they're there to meet about important security issues, including Ukraine, including the important issue of Ukraine. And we have some documentation of the meeting. And of course, who would have thought it? Trump face planted and undercut the Ukrainian position again during this meeting. And we're going to talk about it. Trump might be killing the Chips and Science Act, otherwise better known as just the Chips Act, which invested billions of dollars into microchip manufacturing in the United States and was able to help coerce tens of billions of dollars of private investment as well in these factories. In the event that there is another supply chain crisis, having these microchips produced here instead of, say, in an island in the middle of the Pacific, it would probably be better for the United States. So that's what Biden moved towards. It was going to produce 115,000 jobs, and it looks like Trump's killing it. And we're going to talk about that. Because it shows that a lot of this bring manufacturing back to the United States stuff is bullshit. And at the end of the day, everything is trumped by bitterness and spite. Leadership, truly a Trump quality. And we also have an update about NATO, but that is related to the Keir Starmer Trump meeting and Trump's undermining of Ukraine. I hope you're all doing well. You're mostly through the week. Friday's just a day away. One more day for most of you. The market has basically crashed in response to the chips cancel. Yeah, no. The signals that Trump is going to cancel the Chips and Science Act has led to, like crashes in the market. Now, when we say the market, what I mean is specifically the market in relation to industry that specifically benefited from the Chips and Science Act, not like the entire market, like everything. But, still, it's an important industry. And what's his plan? Don't subsidize the industry, but just tariff things and hope that the tariff creates an environment domestically in America where chips will just kind of sprout from the earth. I don't know. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we need to make ourselves competitive, and that means investment. You cannot just take a stick approach. Look, man. Look, if you want to go with if Trump wants to go with a public American microchip manufacturing company owned by the United States government, okay? Man, he can go that way. He can go the centralist, even go to centralized control way. I don't know, but if that's not what we're doing, if we're not going to have American government officials producing microchips, then you got to incentivize in some way. Unless we're just betting everything on Taiwan forever staying free, which I'm not against Taiwan staying free. I just don't think we should put all of our chips literally in one basket. Or, in this case, peninsula. Having those chips was so important. Dude, and the Chips and Science Act was such a win. It was a win for the economy. It was a win for the jobs market with 78,000 construction jobs, 35,000 production jobs that were going to stay around for a while. Unfortunate. Patching up a weakness in the supply chain for the United States. You work 2 days a week? Do I work 2 days a week? No, I think we got that reversed. I work about, I think, like 6 days a week. I do 5 days of streaming, but then I also write articles and I do my documentary stuff. So that usually takes up my weekend and my off hours during the week. So, yeah, I work 6. Did you think, one second. Let me read these comments. Did you think they will push Canada out of the Five Eyes, Dylan? So do I think the United States is going to push Canada out of Five Eyes? No. Because you would, I don't know. I mean, there's nobody around Trump that will recommend that. That's a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. But if Trump doesn't get a reciprocal back scratching from the Canadians, like if the Canadians somehow, let's say, diplomacy between the two nation states is mishandled in some way, I could see Trump acting rashly. Whether he would stick by such a decision, I don't know. I think, Canada being right there, right next to us, such a long-term post-World War II ally, it'd be pretty silly. But, I wouldn't put it past him. He's the only person I would see do it. There's no incentive to it. It's just losing intelligence assets for no reason. In fact, my main question would be whether or not the Five Eyes nations would be comfortable sharing intelligence with Tulsi Gabbard before she prepares the president's briefing. Thoughts on the measles outbreak? We do have something on the measles outbreak prepared. We do have a story on the measles outbreak prepared. I can't believe I say those words out loud. We need to make the stream black and white, go a little old-timey radio. The measles have taken our children once again. I have to change up the whole vibe of the show if I really want to get in mood for this. Late night for me, Dylan. Well, hello. Thank you so much for the 100 bits. Your late night's going well. Let's start with the measles story since somebody brought it up. Where did I put measles? Okay, that's a sentence. Where did I put the measles? Here it is. I found the measles. Everybody gather around the measles. Measles death of unvaccinated child in Texas. is first fatality in the United States in a decade. Children are dying from measles in the United States. Children are dying from measles. This is not 1920. This is not 1930. This is 2025. And before we even get into this story, before we read any details and get into the tragic update, we're nowhere going in the direction of solving this issue. The issue is only getting worse. The issue about misinformation around vaccination is only getting worse. The issue around how our government deals with vaccination is only getting worse, without RFK being the top health official in the entire country, and with layoffs being made in crucial industries and crucial jobs meant to protect public health, as they're looking to slash, and they're not doing it with much care, losing vital government and public health experience, not only like domestically in the United States, but also internationally when it comes to the slashing of USAID. USAID had 10,000 employees. It was slashed to like 300 employees. It was so bad that people could not evacuate with the help of USAID from the countries that they were working in, because the employees that would help them get like tickets and stuff to get them out, they were no longer hired. They were already fired. So people were just left stranded. So none of this is being done with like great care, with a scalpel. Elon Musk came out with that chainsaw with Melee for a reason, to indicate we're going to destroy the bureaucracy. And if you want to burn down the bureaucracy, well, people are going to burn. People are going to burn. And it's only going to get worse when it comes to the management of our health. And I'm not saying that as like a nice or like a ha 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 ha. I'm upset about it. I'm not saying this as like this is a happy update. I'm saying this as in I have zero faith, zero faith for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to be able to be a public spokesperson to inform the American public about the importance of inoculation. I do not think he is the person for the job. Not only because of his long history of just spouting absolute nonsense on the issue and misinforming the public and being the issue that the government has to, clean up the mess of, but also he's just difficult to listen to. And so I don't think he's going to be that spokesperson that's going to encourage mothers and inform them that it's important to get their kids out there and to get them inoculated. And I don't think a few turnarounds during a Senate confirmation hearing, when he has such a backlog of statements that people could stumble upon, be informed upon. Think about how many of these anti-vaccine groups can take the previous statements he made, even if today he was to completely change course and say, I have seen the light, hallelujah. If he did that today, instead of saying there's no such thing as a safe vaccine, if he did that, people from these anti-vax organizations could still go to them and go to the American public with quotes that he's previously made, put those quotes in there, say, the head of HHS said this about vaccines. The head of HHS said this about this. They can still do that.
This is an immoral, morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
Oh my gosh. Incredulous Buffoon just gifted 10 Tier 1 subs in Gutter Chat to Mike Steins, Stone Diamonds, Illumu Live, and all these people starting a level 3 hype chain. My goodness. Bad. In Gutter Chat, of all places, they're getting dollars passed out. They're getting gifts. If I had the power, I would seize the gifts from the people and give it to the good ones of Site Chat and tax them heavily. But Incredulous Buffoon is a Robin Hood type figure. He has come here to help the people. So I cannot stop him. I am powerless. I am powerless against that people power. Thank you for the 10 gifted. I appreciate it. For real. Okay, where was I? Anyway, he's not going to turn around the public issue when it comes to, information warfare and information war against, children dying of measles. What I do think is going to happen is that he's going to be managing, or not managing is even, honestly, I've thought about this and I don't know where to decide. Would it be better if he did manage HHS, or would it be better if he was hands off and just went on podcasts? Would it be better if he spent his time misinforming the public? Or would it be better if he shut his mouth, didn't misinform the public, but then spent his time managing the actual, like, let's just say the bumper gates, like you're bowling for a society health-wise when it comes to investment and research, etc. I mean, this is a guy who said he wanted to stop research into vaccines for this, like, 5 years. No good reason. It's too dangerous. We need to stop it. Like you think he's talking about like a super weapon. Like, if we continue the research into this, the human race will be wiped out. Our hubris against God is no, shut the fuck, no. Why would you need to stop research? But that's the stuff he wants to do. And so I'm undecided if it would be better if he just was a podcast freak, or if he actually believed in his own bullshit to such an extent that he was like, I'm taking this opportunity, I'm going to grab this with both hands and steer it. And the thing is, who's supposed to be the person to reel him in? It's Donald Trump. So if he starts taking a baseball bat to any like vaccine research and a baseball bat to investment or programs to help get children vaccinated, it has to be Donald Trump to step up and say stop. It has to be him. It has to be him. Whether it would come from his own party pressuring him in the House, good luck with that. Whether it would come from public backlash because too many children start dying of measles, and there's a public reaction because, the news media just cannot help but mention the fact that, hey, it's bad when children die of measles, and you should get them vaccinated, and people get informed about it and get angry at their government for failing on this. I don't know what it would be. Just a general health crisis develops of some sort. Maybe another C-19. Maybe not a variant of that, but something else. Maybe something worse. And we have RFK at the helm. Like, I don't know what you guys thought of Anthony Fauci, but I would take him, honestly, I would take him drunk and high and blindfolded over RFK managing Health and Human Services any day of the week. So I'm not hopeful when it comes to this. And another reason why I'm not hopeful is this says first fatality. This is a day-old story. That means since the story, there's been 24 hours. You want to know what's happened in 24 hours? One second, let me see if I can find it.
Burns is an immoral,
When you say you work 6 days a week, does that include your OnlyFans? Excuse me? Don't tell everybody about that. That's a secret for only the mega fans, okay? That's only for the Patreon subs, okay? That's only at Dylan Burns TV on Patreon. After you get the highest tier and pay for a full year, you get like a secret unlock code on the website. It's like and then you go and it's like a IRL scavenger hunt you have to do. It's a real process to get it. But if you go to Dylan Burns TV on Patreon or DylanBurns.tv on SiteChat and become a member and renew that for a year, I mean, it'll happen. You just gotta look for the signs. It's an ARG. More of an ARG, if anything, really. Yeah. Trashomancer, thank you so much for the tier 1 sub. Ultra Peaks, thank you for the tier 1 sub and being subscribed for 2 months. Thank you for your important work and somehow controversial stance on European freedom. I don't know how it's controversial. Hey guys, I don't like mass graves, and I think people should be able to vote for their leaders. I also think that institutional oligarchical corruption being built into the state is bad. I also think that getting shot and lynched because you're the wrong type of Christian is bad. I think a lot of things are bad. And that's why I'm not a big fan of the Russian invasion or the idea of their version of a multipolar world order in Europe. But I'm just a liberal. I'm just a libtard. Wait, where was I? I was talking about measles. I can't, like, children are dying from measles, and RFK is here to fix the problem. You know, it's not going to be the first. It's not going to be the only death. And I'm not saying this to be
immoral,
sad,
morally corrupt,
about like and like cry, and like I mean I am sad about it, but I'm not saying it to be sad. I'm just saying it as like a matter of fact that more children are going to die of measles. Our government is going to have RFK there to fix the problem, and the only way we can fix that problem is if the government is left alone without any Elon chainsawing, without any RFK interference, without any interference from the sideline or Trump getting whispered in the ear to do something weird. And he just goes off onto podcasts, just does something else. If RFK doesn't manage and just leaves it alone, and it's all just for fame and attention, that's the best case scenario, because then he'll be hands off, and then you'll let underlings maybe manage the whole thing. Worst case scenario, he's an ideologue. Thank you for the 5 gifted tier 1 subs. I appreciate that. Thank you, Treasure Man. Ay. My whole school biology teacher told us to run if measles ever came back, or maybe it was smallpox. Honestly, I think either is probably a good cause. Trump seems a lot more pro-Ukraine than prior these past like 24 hours. Oh, you poor summer child. Oh, you poor summer child. Don't worry. You'll find out. Okay, let's move on. Should we get straight into the Ukraine topic, and the meeting between Keir Starmer and Trump, or should we first do this Jeffrey Epstein thing? Because I think I just kind of want to hit this out of the way quick. Remember what I said yesterday? I don't know if anybody was watching yesterday. I don't know if any of you guys are cool enough to be somebody who actually tunes in every day. Okay. But yesterday, I said that there was only 2 ways that the Jeffrey Epstein files were ever going to come to the public. And thank God I talked about it yesterday before this happened, okay? So I could get myself on the record before it happened. I said there's only 2 ways that it's going to happen. I said number 1 is that they never bring it up again. They never talk about Jeffrey who? Jeffrey huh? And the reason would be is because there's something somewhere about Donald Trump's friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, where Jeffrey Epstein said in 2017 that he was Donald's closest friend for 10 years. Trump said that Jeffrey was his friend, but he liked his women on the younger side. Like, this is, and these things in themselves are not like guilty, send them to prison, There's in themselves, they're just what they are. Things that make you feel uncomfortable, and like, every time I hear that and think that's the president, that makes me feel bad, Like, not because I know, I'd rather not know, because that'd be, but I kind of have to know because it'd be immoral and it's just bad, and I hope it's just not true.
Burns
the type of
is
thing
an
that makes you
immoral,
squirm.
morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
Thank you so much for the gifted UTV. I appreciate that. Over the Nike. Congratulations, Nike. It's that type of thing, Now, that's the first option. The second option was they released something due to public pressure that was building, which I could see building from Mike Lee and others. And the result from that would be they release what we already know, or something with basically multiple black pages completely inked out. Like, in there lies the atomic codes. And we got option 2. If anyone's curious what we got option 2. Okay, I feel confident on my bullishness yesterday. No new big revelations expected in Justice Department's release of Epstein files. Attorney General Pam Bondi is expected to publicly release flight logs and other government documents related to wealthy financier Jeffrey Epstein on Thursday, though the files are unlikely to include new bombshells about sex trafficking case that has captured the fascination of conspiracy theorists. The documents being released by the Justice Department are unlikely to satisfy online sleuths eager for fresh details about Epstein's crimes and connections to famous people that have long been the subject of intense media scrutiny. The Justice Department said the first batch, expected to be posted online later Thursday, is largely made up of files that have already been circulating in the public domain since Epstein died by suicide in a Manhattan federal jail a month after his arrest in 2019. Before the documents were publicly released, binders that read "The Epstein Files, Part 1" were given at the White House to conservative political commentators with large followings on X, formerly known as Twitter. The binders read "Declassified," though it was not immediately clear if the files had ever even been classified, and described Trump's White House as the most transparent administration. Bonnie suggested in a Thursday letter to FBI Director Kash Patel that more records were recently discovered. She ordered the FBI to hand over the full and complete Epstein files to her by Friday morning and directed Patel to conduct an immediate investigation into why her order to the FBI to turn over all the documents was not followed. Okay. So everything they're releasing is stuff we already know. That's the long and short of it. Everything they're releasing and doing this big public show that these dumb schmucks, by the way, the guy on the left, that's DC Drano, by the way. He's one of the biggest Neanderthals on Twitter. Try to stay away from this tweet. They'll give you actual brain aids. This is a public service announcement. This is not a political critique. This is a warning for everyone, Trump supporters included. This is a man who would believe the dumbest of bullshit. These are the type of people that see like airsoft videos of Russians like shooting at people speaking like chopped up English, and then they fall over and go, "Ah!" and they say, "Wow, oh my gosh, what a brutal war. Another American mercenary killed. This is why nobody should go over there." Like the easy smucks, right? That's who they brought to this, to hold up these declassified documents that we don't even know if were declassified. And it's all just information we already know. It's all just information we already know. And also, recognize that the people that this is being given to, they're all Trump sycophants. Let's say for a moment that these files actually included something that was negative about Trump, something that was like, "Hello, I am Donald J. Trump. I like to diddle the youth," right? From like an Epstein recording. Do you think that DC Drano would undo a decade of political loyalty and activism and cultish-like behavior in order to reveal that to the public, if that actually was revealed in these? Do you think they would ever give that information, if they ever give that information out, to anyone who would actually reveal it? Why do you think Donald Trump right now is taking the press pool and the White House Correspondents Association, breaking them over his knee and saying, "We're going to choose the press pool now. We're going to choose the president shall choose who covers the president and how they cover the president. And if you give a little bit too much critical critique of the president, then maybe you shall not cover the president any longer." Basically, Donald Trump's angry that during these, briefings and during these press conferences, there are journalists from organizations that will not lick the dirt off his soles. And so he wants them gone. He wants them gone, or he wants to make it so there's only one organization in there that will ask him difficult questions. And it'll then be questions like, "What color are you going to paint all the planes flying back all the illegals?" So, Mr. President, what Bible verse inspires you the most? Maybe not that one. He failed that one before. Point is, it's going to be the sycophants. And so, if this is the type of sycophantic dedication that he's getting in the press pool, do you think if he ever actually had anything of import that could reveal something compromising about his side of the aisle or any ally of his, or himself especially, that he would give it to a bunch of internet sleuths, even if they're ones cultishly devoted to him? No. And that's why the files are all stuff we've already seen. And that's why if they release anything else, and that's why it says phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 is only going to be information that is against those he does not like. I honestly believe that. I believe that if Trump releases anything, he will selectively release it the same way that WikiLeaks selectively released the information on the hacks into the Hillary campaign, where they said they had both files from the RNC and the DNC, and they just chose to only release the ones from the DNC. That they do that for a purpose. Why do they do that? Because it's to have a certain effect. It's not about transparency. It's about transparency on one side to affect the public one way. If we know all the Democrats that are pedos on this list and they are all exposed, and we don't get a bunch of Republicans, do you know what that means? If that's the end result, though, and I'm just making this warning in advance, it means Donald Trump is protecting pedophiles within the Republican Party. It means Donald Trump is protecting pedophiles within the Republican Party and is probably using the fact that they're pedophiles against them as leverage against them. So what is released and who is exposed in this, what names are released, whether or not there's anybody that is a Trump ally or in the Trump circle or within his side of the party, that should be paid attention to. Because I don't think this is beneath him. If it was beneath him, then he wouldn't have nominated Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General, to be the top law enforcement official in the country. Why would you choose a Kitty Diddler to be the top law enforcement official in the country? Definitely as somebody who's, constantly going after, like, I'm going to go after the deep state, and his followers are like, oh, we need to go after these underground sex cabals, sex trafficking cabals. And then he picks Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General. Might as well just pick Jeffrey Epstein to be Attorney General. Why not? Either way, they're never going to release anything they're never going to release anything of import. But if they ever do, it'll only be on those that are enemies of Trump. It will not be Trump. I think that we've fundamentally shifted how the Attorney General's office and how these types of transparency efforts are done. And I don't think that Trump has any interest at all in revealing anything about himself. Do you think DeSantis won't let the Tate brothers into Florida because he's worried they'll compete with him for the sex trafficking tariff? My goodness. You guys want to go over to the Tate brothers quick? My God, what a bunch of... Look at these. Look at these clowns. They think they're so fucking important. He has fucking... Look how many MAGA hats he has in his hand. DC Drano. Look how many MAGA... Oh my God, man. Carry on the armband. Okay. You guys wanted the Tate brothers, right? I just saw somebody brought up the Tate brothers. We can talk about the Tate brothers quick. I don't have a lot to say about it. I mean, it's kind of obvious what happened. So, the Tate brothers, Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate, have left Romania after Romania prosecutors lifted a travel ban on them. Now, the way that Romania had been handling it is, we believe that if we let them out of the country, they're not going to come back. So we want to make sure that we go through all the evidence, we go through all the facts of the investigation, we see if there's anything we can get on these guys, basically, to be blunt, and then we'll let them go eventually if they don't find anything, which they're still digging. They had stuff. I mean, everyone has stuff, because Andrew Tate is on camera saying stuff like, I steal from my hookers. I like to steal from them. I lie to them about their taxes, and I tell them, excuse me, but the taxes took this much out, and then I pocket the money. He said that. Now, whether that was just fun, and he was joking, and haha, and now let's say that is the case. That means he's encouraging his audience to, the stealing and doing that towards sex workers is funny and good, and you should do that. And that's the type of behavior he's encouraging. He's encouraging that amongst, the youth and stuff. It's bad. Bad. But also, do we really buy that? I don't buy it. Either way, Romania was not letting them leave because they still wanted them to face trial in Romania. Donald Trump then gets involved after he gets elected, pressures the Romanian government to release the Tate brothers. We've known about this for weeks. And now the travel ban on them has been lifted. They've immediately left the country, and now they're in Florida. British American influencer Andrew and Tristan Tate, who are facing trial in Romania on charges including human trafficking, have arrived in the U.S. after Romania prosecutors lift a 2-year travel ban. Andrew Tate, 38, and brother Tristan, 36, have strongly denied the allegations against them. The two departed Bucharest on a private jet early on Thursday and arrived in Florida hours later, with Andrew telling reporters they are misunderstood. Romanian prosecutors stressed the case against them had not been dropped, and they remain under judicial control, meaning they have to regularly report to authorities and are expected to return to Romania. However, the accident sparked concern that prosecutors felt political pressure from the Trump administration. The U.S. president said he knew nothing about the Tate brothers being released from Romania. The Tate brothers are accused of human trafficking and forcing an organized group to sexually exploit women in Romania. Andrew Tate is also accused of rape. In the U.S., they also face a civil case from a woman who alleges the brothers coerced her into sex work and then defamed her after she gave evidence to Romanian authorities. The brothers also face separate charges in the UK of rape and human trafficking. They deny all the allegations against them. Upon arrival, Andrew Tate told reporters, "We live in a democratic society where it's innocent until proven guilty, and I think my brother and I are largely misunderstood. There's a lot of opinions about us, a lot of things that got around about us on the internet," he said, adding that they are yet to be convicted of any crime in our lives ever. The brothers declined to answer questions about their release. You know why Trump loves them? Because they're like Trump. The way they defend themselves is like Trump. They rely on the crowd. They rely on media schemes and bullshit. They just like deny, will never provide any evidence. If somebody provides evidence to them directly, they'll just like say, no, that's fake, or I don't care, or they'll just ignore it. Because the thing is, they've been confronted with them committing crimes knowingly before. They've committed 2 crimes publicly before. We know that they're criminals. It's just a question of whether they're going to get convicted for any crimes. They're not misunderstood. It's a question of whether or not every single thing that the court is bringing against them is true, and whether or not they're going to get found guilty of anything or ever held accountable for anything. And in this case, it might not be the case, especially since if they're not in Romania, they could just decide to not go back. And if Trump says, I don't want them to go back, or they don't have to go back, what's going to happen? A lawyer for the Tate brothers, Joseph McBride, said they'll return to Romania at the end of March to meet the prosecutors before returning to the U.S. They feel secure in America for several reasons, the primary one being that Donald Trump is the president. As a result, they are excited to call America their home again. Yeah, I'm sure he didn't do anything. As did the administration pressured the Romanian government to release them, he said, I know nothing about that. I don't know. You're saying he's on a plane right now? UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who was sitting next to Trump in the White House, said, there's an English element here, so obviously it's important justice is done, and human trafficking is obviously, to my mind, a security risk. Excuse me, let me just chime in and say trafficking is bad, as the British Prime Minister quickly. Can I just emphasize that I think trafficking is not good? My gosh, what a risky statement. Every criminal who is willing to swear fealty to Trump will get protection as president of the United States. Well, I don't know. I remember Roger Stone got pretty boned. Doesn't help that Barron Trump is a fan of Tate. That is true. Apple does not fall too far from the tree, as they say. Kind of hard when you're surrounded with all that, though, huh? Kind of doomed from the get-go. Okay, moving on. Do you guys, you know what? I think it's time we talk about the Ukraine stuff. I think it's time. Oh boy. This one's a doozy. This one's a doozy, and it just shows exactly what I thought. This just shows what I thought Trump was going to be like. The flip-flopping on security policy, making promises, undercutting previous promises committed, then recommitting, then making it vague, then uncommitting again, and flip-flop, 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 flip-flop. We're getting a lot of that. We're getting a lot of that. We're getting a lot of Russian apologia. We're getting a lot of public concessions. We're getting a lot of piss poor deal making from the deal maker in chief. And now he had a meeting with Keir Starmer where he then went back on what his administration was trying to do, which was cleaning up Pete Hegseth's mess. So Pete Hegseth went to Munich. I think it was Munich, but he went to Europe and he spoke to the Europeans. And while speaking to the Europeans, he suggested, while doing this tour of Europe, that NATO membership was off the table for Ukraine. And also that U.S. troops were off the table and a bunch of stuff was off the table. And then others reacted to this negatively because some people within the Republican Party still have some sense of how, diplomacy works or geopolitics works. There might be a diplomat or two within the entire apparatus of the Republican Party, and they're realizing, like, wait a second, you don't want to give that up right off the bat unless you get concessions. And so Pete Hegseth then went out in public, the unexperienced Fox News host, and was wait, let me just reel this back a second. It's just a state. I didn't take. This is, I don't want to take away the options of the president, and, I don't want to take away from his leverage, and yada, yada, and he reeled it back. And then Donald Trump had this meeting with Keir Starmer, and then he worked to undo all that backpedaling, and then went straight back forward with NATO membership is off the table, as well as a bunch of other stuff. Let's get into it. Let's see a report from PBS on the meeting, and then we're going to take some snippets from the meeting and break them down.
As UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer pulled up to the White House today,
President Trump, can you get a peace deal done in Ukraine?
Yes. Ukraine was top of mind before he and President Trump even got inside. In the Oval Office,
we're going to be discussing many things today.
Starmer, the Labour Party leader, made his pitch for the U.S. to include Ukraine and all of Europe in negotiations.
We want to work with you to make sure that peace deal is enduring, that it lasts, that it's a deal that goes down as a historic deal that nobody breaches.
But for his tougher asks, Starmer brought a sweetener. A letter direct from King Charles, inviting Trump for a historic second state visit 7 years after his first.
The answer is yes. On behalf of our wonderful First Lady, Melania, and myself, the answer is yes.
From there, Trump gave a show.
Can I just throw something out there quick? So, I believe that, yes, to some extent, you're going to have to flatter Trump. I think the former Prime Minister of the Netherlands, as, for example, the head of NATO, was a great pick. He's somebody who's widely considered like a Trump whisperer. I think he's going to do the job well. I would have preferred an Eastern European, but outside of an Eastern European, I think he's probably the best next pick, definitely when it comes to dealing with Trump. And yes, it's going to come with some flattery and saying, you're smart enough to know that the Russians want X, Y, and Z, and, negotiation takes X, this. So what pathway should we take? Should we do, there's a way you would have to talk to him that I understand that will include some amount of flattery. But don't think that you just give him oh, come meet the queen, or well, I guess no, come meet the king. Oh, come over to our country, have some beans and toast, and we'll flatter you, and you go fish, and we'll come spend some time at your magnificent hotel. Don't think that's all gonna lead to him giving you what you want. And I'm not saying that doesn't help him have a better view of you if you're nice to him. Like if you go in there and say sup cunt, I think he's not gonna take you kindly. But the problem is, if you go in there and you start brown-nosing him, you don't think that no matter how unintelligent somebody might think Donald Trump is in certain areas, like, for example, geopolitics or Eastern European history or any of the things that he is putting his fingers in like he's an expert. But you don't think he can see groveling when he sees it? You don't think he can see brown-nosing when he sees it? And how do you think he reads that? Do you think he reads that as, oh, this is a strong ally for me who I can work with on a productive basis to get things done because I like him personally? Or do you think he smells blood in the water? He sees weakness and he thinks, how much can I bleed this man dry until he's a stone? I think it's the latter. I really do. And I think part of the reason that he's so friendly with the oligarch, with the foreign authoritarians and the oligarchs like Putin and the Orban, is because they kind of have they do give off the air of, the type of strongman like aesthetic that he likes, They know how to flatter him enough by just kind of like treating him like one of the boys. But he also like treats them and he sees them like killers. Like these are tough guys, you know, and he sees their displays of toughness through mafia-esque actions that he can basically understand, that are too base for him not to understand. And so if you just come up to him and you just brown nose him, he's going to run over you. And I know this is maybe a little unorthodox, definitely if I'm saying this of U.S. allies, but I think you need to bloody the nose of the U.S. president slightly. I think that you need to do what Malcolm Turnbull did and what others did, which isn't like, go up, fuck you, but you like be clear, like, no, this is my interest. I have to do this. You know, if you stand strong and you show clear to him where your interests lie, then he's going to act differently near them. That's how Zelensky went from a deal where he was going to have to give up half of Ukraine's natural wealth, critical ports, critical infrastructure, $500 billion for about $110 billion worth of aid. I mean, that's like 2 to 3 times greater than Ukraine's GDP. And he went from that to a joint investment fund, getting wealth from the Ukrainian materials, which then invests into the Ukrainian economy and then goes back into the investment fund. They went from America is extracting resources from Ukraine like a colony in exchange for its support, but I would say lackluster considering the price tag. And that changed to a joint investment deal between the United States and Ukraine for rebuilding, where that's where the money goes. See, and that was done through Zelensky saying no, standing out in public. And then you want to know what Trump did? He sent out Mike Waltz. Mike Waltz went out there and he said they need to shut up and take the deal. You had his base going out there, hitting the war drum. Boom, boom, boom. Trump must be strong again. Trump must be tough again. Like he was against the Mexicans. No, he wasn't. Like he was against the Canadians. No, he wasn't. And then once that drumbeat has gone on for about a week, once there's been enough lambasting of the Ukrainians, once Trump has called Zelensky a dictator while refusing to call Putin one, then eventually they accept a new deal, a new compromise solution, which is much closer to Ukraine's interests, while also well within Trump's interests. So instead of bleeding Ukraine like a stone, they worked with them from an advantageous position. And that was only done by Zelensky saying no and not just brown-nosing and rolling over. In fact, you want to know what I would have done? And maybe this would have been a little, I don't know, controversial. But I think either Keir Starmer or Emmanuel Macron should have told Trump that they will veto his UN resolution if it does not include a direct condemnation of the Russians in the resolution. And if not, he shouldn't try to pass it at all. Now, it could have been one of them. All you need is one of them to test the water. One plays good cop, one plays bad cop. But you gotta show that you're deeply, deeply interested in protecting Ukrainian interests and European interests, and you're willing to back it up with force. And that's why Europe has prepared retaliatory measures when it comes to, for example, sanctions. You just got to be willing to pull the trigger on it. Definitely since Trump, in his recent first cabinet meeting, talked about 25% sanctions against the European Union across the board, which, because they don't take enough agricultural goods, even though they're our fourth largest agricultural trading partner.
Wonderful First Lady Melania and myself, the answer is yes.
From there, Trump gave a show of confidence that a peace deal between Kyiv and Moscow would hold. Starmer, as well as French President Emmanuel Macron, have both agreed to send troops to the region to keep the peace if a deal is reached. The U.S., on the other hand,
I don't think we're going to even be necessary, but I don't think there'll be any problem with keeping the deal, with the security.
Earlier this week, Starmer announced UK's defense budget will rise to 2.5% by 2027, a move clearly aimed at pleasing Trump.
We get along very famously, as you would say.
And this is under the Labour Prime Minister. This is increasing defense spending right now seems to be a bipartisan issue in British politics. And so is supporting Ukraine. I don't know if you guys saw, but Nigel Farage, longtime Ukraine critic, I don't know if he if this shows some actual shift in him. I doubt it. But it might just be him noticing the political winds. He says that Ukraine being inside of NATO is probably essential for a peace deal. Nigel Farage, Brexit Nigel Farage, believes Ukraine has to be in NATO for a peace deal. So it shows the amount of bipartisanship that is in British politics over support for Ukraine. And it also shows Nigel Farage trying to somewhat normalize his party so they can actually try to overtake the Conservatives, in my opinion. Even if he doesn't personally believe it, and I still think that he probably is a Russia apologist in sheep's clothing.
But as Trump praised Starmer, he indicated he trusts Russian President Vladimir Putin to stick to any peace deal.
I've known him for a long time now, and I think he will. I don't believe he's going to violate his word.
That in stark contrast to how Starmer and the UK has viewed Putin, as the press noted.
It sounds as though one of you completely trusts President Putin and one of you doesn't trust him an inch.
At the same time, Trump played up his relationship with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
By the way, can I just throw this out there? Like, Trump didn't just like a little bit say he trusts Putin. He kept saying he trusts Putin again and again and again. He keeps saying this recently. And honestly, this is stupid. This is really stupid. Now, it might be good for short-term politics, but like, if Trump cares at all about his brand, if they relaunch the war, then Trump was shown to be a liar. And so if he makes a shaky foundation and they restart the war, he'll be shown to be a liar. The problem is, like, I think that'll hurt him. Maybe he thinks he can just lie his way out of that and just say, like, well, the reason they started the war is because the Democrats, they thought they were going to win the election. Or, well, the Democrats recently won that election, and now, you know, J.D. Vance lost in 2028, so they invaded because Democrats came in. I was keeping the peace. Even though he built the foundations for war by building a shaky foundation. He'll sell it either way. But, like, when he talks about, like, trusting Putin, like, how much he trusts Putin, it's not going to play well. I don't care how much he pivots it. If people can say, I trust Putin, there won't be a war, he won't relaunch it, he won't do this, he won't do that, and then you can just splice that followed by Ukraine being invaded by tanks. I mean, we saw how those people were humiliated, like Hassan and Mearsheimer at the start of the invasion when they said it was impossible Ukraine was going to get invaded. Then they got invaded. Some people still choose to take these people seriously on the issue. But for a moment, people saw the truth about the matter. So I hope the same thing would be true. But to say that you trust a man who's already violated these agreements like twice is not pushing towards an agreement or diplomacy. It comes off as dumb naivete. That's what it comes off as.
At the same time, Trump played up his relationship with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who will be in Washington tomorrow to sign off on a critical minerals deal. Reporters pointed out comments Trump clearly made about Zelensky online just last week.
Mr. President, do you still think that Mr. Zelensky is a dictator?
Did I say that? I can't believe I said that.
Trump stood by.
This is what the next 4 years is going to be, by the way. Trump says something, he has an effect on the public, he informs the public, Zelensky's a dictator. And then some people in his base was like, I knew it, I heard this on the Tucker Carlson show, and they go with it. It undermines Ukraine's support in the United States. And then once he's gotten the diplomatic leverage he thought he was getting by just like lying about the people he was negotiating against, in this instance, Ukraine, then afterwards it's like, oh, what? No, I never said. I don't know what you mean. What? He does the damage and then pretend he never did anything. He said it. We all saw it. He just thinks this is funny. And I looked into MAGA space and how they were reacting to it. They thought this is funny too. They think it's funny to just call him a dictator and then reel it back in. They think it's funny to make people think, oh, democracy doesn't matter. Democracy doesn't matter in this struggle. There's no difference between having no civil society and having a civil society. There's no difference between being able to be in Ukraine and say Zelensky's a cunt and not being able to do that in Russia and say Putin's a cunt. There's like no difference between these things, right? That this false equivalence is damaging to the Ukrainian cause. Deeply damaging. Oh my goodness. A piece of dust just went in. Anyway, it's highly damaging to the Ukrainian cause. And he doesn't even want to take credit for doing that damage.
His push for tariffs, including with Europe. And throughout, both leaders stressed the importance of a strong U.S.-UK alliance. But Trump, not so subtly, reminded his counterpart about their relative strength.
Could you take on Russia by yourselves?
Well,
Awkward moments became more open disagreement when a reporter asked about Vice President Vance's criticisms of the UK. Earlier,
here's a question. Could the United States take on Russia without Europe? Could the United States take on China economically without Europe? If Europe doesn't participate in any of the sanction regimes against China, definitely when Germany already has like a manufacturing crisis in the car sector, many countries are already dealing with economic problems, and you want them to shut off the country's largest exporter from going into their countries because of a crisis in Taiwan when we won't care about their own backyard? Look, I'm not like a Europa-boo. I don't know what you would call it, a Europa-boo. I'm not in here saying all hail the European Union or whatever. What I am saying is that if you just treat like the European Union's people as a bunch of limp-wristed pencil necks who don't know what they're doing and have no leverage because their military spending has been dog doo-doo up to this point, what you're going to end up doing is forget the real leverage that they have, and then you're going to isolate yourselves in future diplomatic crises, and it's going to be difficult for you to, you know, for example, if you want to actually challenge the Chinese economically to dissuade an invasion, it's going to be more difficult to rally the Europeans if you weren't there for them. If you aren't there for them, why are they going to be there for you? Especially if it's not in their economic interest to be there for you. Point is, it's my general point is just like having allies is good. And it is true that like the United Kingdom alone wouldn't be able to take down Russia, but it also wouldn't be the United Kingdom alone.
This month, Vance decried the UK as censoring free speech, particularly religious expression. Today, Vance seemed focused on the internet and how to handle inflammatory, sometimes threatening speech, arguing British policy blocking some was a U.S. concern.
What the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
Okay, but if we're saying that, then let me just throw this out there. Does that mean that for all the call of deporting those who protested against Israel at like campuses, or what they say pro-Hamas protesters or whatever, across college campuses, deporting their citizens, does that mean that they could deport their American citizens from their countries if they do protests or stuff that they don't like? Let's say somebody was to, I don't know, like do some like really crazy red pill protest, or I don't know what it would be, and they would deport them. Could they make that call? Like, this can become reciprocal. And if there's anything that could encourage the Europeans to unite as a bloc, in one way, I think actually being between the Russians and the Americans and being in this problem, this crisis, it's bad in most ways. The one way it's good is that it might wake the Europeans up towards some bloc unity. But if that's the case, then it's going to make it much harder for us to strong-arm any of these countries on a unilateral basis.
Starmer immediately responded with a polite back off.
Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely right. But in relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our history there. This has been a very good and very productive visit.
Side by side at an afternoon news conference, the two leaders continued working on the latest version
Thank you very much.
of their country's special relationship.
Now, there's one thing that PBS chose not to include that I think that they should have included, and it was the problem I was showing earlier, or I was talking about earlier, which is that Pete Hegseth went out there, said no NATO for Ukraine, that he walked it back after backlash from within his party and outside his party, saying you're undermining your leverage before negotiations. Who went out public and said, I would never want to undermine the president. And then the president went out there and, next to Keir Starmer, undermined himself in negotiations, taking it off the table, giving himself less leverage. Art of the deal, everyone. Art of the deal. He had a chance to save himself, and he chose to disregard it.
The Europeans want Ukraine to be part of NATO as part of this deal. Are you willing to budge on that at all, or is it a firm?
Well, I could be very nice and say, oh, well, we'll work to it. Look, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. That's what started this whole thing. And Biden said that, and all of a sudden the gun started. That was one of the primary reasons it started. And this was long before President Putin. They never said it was an impossibility. So we can say, oh, gee, well, we'll try. But that's something that's just not going to happen. And then the other question you ask is about the land. will you get your land back? Well, they've fought long and hard on the land, and you and I will be discussing that, and we're going to certainly try and get as much as we can back. But on the NATO, it's just not, that's not going to happen. Yeah, please.
The second part, I mean, like, if you're trying to find a silver lining here, hearing like we're going to try to get as much of the land back isn't the worst thing you could hear. The worst thing you could hear is, I mean, like, Russia's annexed it. I mean, it's there. You know, the worst thing you could hear is like, oh shit, does that mean they're giving up Kherson? Like, I could imagine worse things, but let's not hold ourselves to the standard of, let's hold the president of the United States. He's not literally pushing Ukrainians while calling them coalholes in the camp. So let's, oh, woohoo, yay. You know, no, we're not doing that. We're going to hold the president to a higher standard than that, because we should hold the president to a higher standard than that, because he's the president of the United States. So the first thing here is, okay, before we get into like Trump's fantastic historical acumen, let's just get into like the basics of negotiating here. The Russians want things. The Americans want things. What do the Americans want in a perfect world? Well, in a perfect world, they would want the Russians out of Ukraine. They would want Ukraine, I imagine, if we're talking about all of Ukraine and its alliance, like if we're talking about this whole alliance, they would want Ukraine to get its land back. And they would want to set up a foundation that would stop Russia from invading Ukraine again, right? Russia out of Ukraine, Ukraine get its land, build up foundation for peace, and rebuilding project. Now, there's some other stuff like the returning of children, POWs, for example, accountability for war crimes. But those are like the big ticket issues that everyone's discussing and are the biggest sticking point. Even though the Russians are never going to turn over their war criminals, they're going to want to give them medals on state TV for the next 2 to 3 decades, calling the Bucha massacre perpetrators like heroes on radio programs and award them and stuff. Because that's the culture. That's the political culture that's currently in Russia. Now, if you want those things, the only way you can get those things is if you convince the Russian that the only way that they'll get what they want is by giving at least some of those things up to some extent, partially or totally. For example, you want NATO not in Ukraine, then you got to give Ukraine its land back. That right there, boom. If you talk to Ukraine and said, hey, no NATO membership, but you get back all your land, what I'm sure most would almost certainly take it, honestly. Now, they probably would want some agreement to stop a future invasion, maybe a unilateral defense pact between France and Germany and the United Kingdom and Ukraine, whatever it would be, unilateral defense pact instead of NATO, and to stop future invasions or whatever. That would be an instance of compromise, because you're using your leverage to get something you want, and they're using their leverage to get something they want, which is NATO out of Ukraine. This is a very broad strokes idea. This is not like my proposal for the peace solution. My point is, this is generally how negotiations are supposed to work. And before the negotiations have really started, they're just like, when I say before they've started, I mean they're just getting underway. As in, like, they're just starting to meet, the delegations are just starting to meet in Istanbul. They're just starting like the diplomatic missions. They haven't even really started like drawing the lines or whatever. They haven't even started that, and we already have given up NATO membership. We've already given up American troops in Ukraine, which is the deterrence leverage. We've already given up leverage when it comes to the Russians wanting an election in Ukraine and the end of martial law so Ukrainian men can flee, which is what I think is what they want. Of course, maybe you think that Vladimir Putin cares about Ukrainian democracy and that Donald Trump cares about the liberalization and democratization of the Ukrainian state. Maybe that's the planet you're on, but I am on planet Earth, okay? You've given up that. You've given up so much when it comes to Ukraine and its basic interests of wanting to be at the table. That is a big point. That's a big point for the Ukrainian people. 91% of Ukrainians say that they don't want to do a peace deal if they're not at the table negotiating, right? That's a huge concession, them not being at the table. No troops, no NATO. No, they're not at the table to discuss their own future. They're probably not getting all their land back. Another concession they made publicly. And something he's kind of reiterating a bit here. We're going to try to get all of it. We're going to try to get as much as we can. Not we're going to try to get all of it back, and we'll. He didn't even attempt to say at one point he's going to try that, a deal for deal. He's setting the standard that Russia's going to keep stuff right off from the get-go. It's just giving up leverage, giving up leverage, giving up leverage, giving up leverage. And so, where is this art of the deal? Where is this deal maker in chief? Okay? Because if that deal maker in chief or that deal maker from somewhere around him doesn't step off, Keith Kellogg doesn't grab the steering wheel and turn it this way or turn it that way, Donald Trump might, well, hit the iceberg, sink the peace deal, and then we'll have war through 2025. And you want to know what? I think that's a very probable outcome. In talks with Russia, Trump repeats his Afghanistan playbook. Trump's negotiation strategy in Afghanistan resulted in capitulation to the Taliban, abandoning of U.S. allies. Experts see strong parallels to how he's dealing with Russia today. When they know you want out and they know you won't stay in, it's just a waiting game. And let me just tell you, as Trump is giving up all this leverage, as Trump is brown-nosing the Russians both diplomatically and publicly about their history, while that's all going on, the Russians are escalating the war. They're continuing to strike major Ukrainian cities. I just had a conversation with my friend the other day about his family members getting killed in Russian strikes, a husband, a wife, and their son. These are continuing. These strikes are continuing. The military buildup is continuing, and North Korea is continuing to send more troops. And you want to know what? I do think that this at least is partially due to the Trump administration. The Biden administration, in response to North Korea sending its troops and having North Korea invading Europe, allowed long-range strikes against Russia, which Trump said was a mistake and dangerous and too escalatory and that we needed to reel it back. That's what he said in response. But he did that, Biden, in part, to try to respond to this escalation from the Russians, as in to say, you escalate, we escalate, so you better stop. It's a warning of, we can play this game, I don't know if you'll win. It's something you might call peace through power, peace through, I don't know, courageousness. Somebody will think of a slogan. Toughness, of course. Peace through somebody will think of a slogan that aligns with that. But the point is that it was a response to deter them. Now, with Trump coming into office and with $3.8 billion presidential drawdown authority just sitting there, and the only threat I've seen him make towards the Russians was on the campaign trail. Maybe they'll escalate aid. Haven't sent any aid since getting in the office. They haven't signed any new presidential drawdown authority. $3.8 billion sitting there. He could send it tomorrow. He's chosen not to. He's instead chosen the brown nose. He's chosen to do these things. And while he's doing these things, the Russians are trying to increase their leverage, not only diplomatically by making Trump give up all these concessions before he even gets to the table, but also militarily. Curb stomping Ukrainian buildings into the ground every day, demolishing them with their bombs, and escalating North Korean troop deployments. But don't worry, we have Trump's diplomatic and geopolitical expertise to save the day.
We've been discussing AUKUS with the Australians and the Brits. Were you discussing AUKUS with the Prime Minister, sir?
What does that mean?
AUKUS, the Australia-US Defence Alliance.
Yeah, well, we'll be discussing that. We've had another great relationship, and you have too, with Australia.
Yeah.
We've had a very good relationship with Australia, please.
Mr. President.
He doesn't know. World's in his hands. The whole world is in his hands. The whole world is in his hands. He doesn't know AUKUS. Yes, he doesn't know what AUKUS is. Which, for those of you who don't know, it's an alliance making up, Australia, the United Kingdom, in the United States, that is like aligns, each other on security interests. Things like, for example, like nuclear submarines and coordination, and particularly in the Pacific. But yeah, no, he doesn't know that. He's president for 4 years, going on his 5th. Doesn't know that. Even though he would have gone to those meetings. He would have gone to those meetings. Ah! Painful. You know what somebody should have asked? Like, oh God, somebody should have just been like, what do you think of India's participation in AUKUS? Just fuck with him. Just ask him nonsense questions and see what he does. We can't do that anymore because the press pool is corrupt, but it would have been fun. Well, I guess he could do it when he's walking around. President, do you think it's good what the Nepalese president said, endorsing your actions in AUKUS? Dementia Don. I mean, I don't even know if it's Dementia Don or you just never paid attention. There's 2 options. 1, Dementia Don. 2, he just never paid attention. And I mean, we got reports that the president, that his staff would try so hard to get him to pay attention. That they would sit down with him and they would, hey, thank you, Westside Tyler. Did he just raid? It just said Westside Tyler joined with his viewers. Say hello. I don't know how that works. What does that mean? He joined with his viewers on YouTube. I don't know how that works. Is he stalking me? Is Westside Tyler stalking me currently? That's what I assume. I assume I'm being stalked by Westside Tyler. President Sunday, please help me. I'm kidding. Okay, where was I? How the fuck does he not know what AUKUS is? I'm sorry, it's just so embarrassing. God, man. It makes you really think, like, how much does he know about NATO when he talks about pulling out? I mean, how much does he know? How much? Like, if you were to ask, what's the history of NATO? For example, Donald Trump recently was talking about the European Union, and he said that the European Union was founded to fuck over the United States. Well, not his exact words. His exact words was screw over, right? But you get the point. Screw the United States. That was the founding reason of the European Union. He just doesn't know any of the history. Just shoots from the hip on it. I think he likes storytelling. I think that's it. In the moment, it would be convenient if he wants to place a 25% tariff on the European Union to say that the reason it was created was because it wanted to, hurt America. Because if you have that current narrative, it makes it easier to justify you starting a trade war. Did you guys see this? Do we have anything else on Ukraine lined up? No, everything else is other topics, but we still got a decent amount of foreign policy stuff. I don't know if you guys saw this, but the Jasper County Sheriff Office in Indiana released body cam footage of a January 6er getting blown away by a police officer, which is from last month on January 6th. Man's name was Matthew Huddle, and he had an incident where he was, going with the police, and he was, acting, I mean, I don't know how to put it, but crazy, and saying he was going to shoot himself before the deputy shot him. So, you ever play those Telltale games where, you make one choice, you make another choice, no matter what, the same outcome happens? Either way, tragedy, but not super unexpected. If you pardon a bunch of crazy people who were ready to overthrow the government and you pardon all of them with no care or notice to what crimes they committed or their mental state or why they did it, and their goal was to overthrow the United States government, some of them are going to be really, really crazy. Some of them are going to be people who are going to be dangerous. The crazy one just went off first. The dangerous ones will wait for a weak moment in the country.
You are at a felony status for driving while suspended. So today you are going to come with me.
Well, I can't.
You're going to have to, okay? You're going to come with me today, all right?
No, I can't go to jail for this, sir.
You're going to have to come.
Can I get a ride?
No.
Are you
There's no-
sure?
this is
I'll violate my...
Just listen to me, okay? Number one, it's a felony offense. There's no leeway with felonies in the state of Indiana. Now, maybe if it was a misdemeanor offense, I could work something out with you, but it's not a misdemeanor. It's a felony offense, okay? So that's why I can't work with you today with it. Okay, I understand your circumstances, but you understand that you can't drive. Okay, so your driving has resulted into this situation. Okay. Now,
Hey, do you think if somebody storms the Capitol, tries to overthrow the government, and is basically then sent the signal by the President of the United States that everything you did was righteous and good and you can go out through their pardon? Which is the message that many of them received. What type of relationship does that encourage between them and the law? Does that encourage one of an accountability, or does that encourage one of, gives a fuck? The president's got my back. I can try to overthrow the government. It doesn't matter. The president's got my back. I'm not saying that's the reason this happened here. I don't have this guy's psychological profile. I'm just saying, if you pardon people for terrible crimes and you send them to give them the message that, yeah, I can get away with it, don't be surprised if, they didn't treat the law superficially. And then this guy then found out, like, oh shit, I was pardoned by the president, but I still got arrested for those things. I just got arrested. Oh shit, suspended life. And he's watching his life right in front of him. He's watching himself having to get put back in that prison cell. Because, again, of his poor decision-making, just like the poor decision-making that led to him storming the Capitol. And that's what led to this tragic incident.
what I'm going to do, all right, is I'm going to put your information right here for a sec. I want you to turn around and put your hands on you. Don't you do it, buddy!
And he goes for a gun, and you can expect what happens next. Like, I'm going to shoot myself, and then bam, bam, bam. A lot of J6ers from Indiana. Like, Levi Jones just brought that up in chat. That is true. There are a lot of J6ers from Indiana. Now that you mention it. Are you 100% confident Ukrainians would be willing to be permanently banned from NATO? No. I'm not 100% confident of that. I'm not. Definitely if you don't give them enough concessions in return. They want a security guarantee. If this deal doesn't include what they think is a solid security guarantee, I don't think they're going to take the deal. Okay, next segment. This is the second J6er to die at a shooting with a cop, and one of the numerous that have been going back to prison. Yeah. I mean, look. I mean, Donald Trump's supposed to be the tough on crime guy. Like, hey, pardon, if you keep letting these guys out of prison, what do you expect to happen? And I mean, like, what did you expect to happen, guys? Hey, you take back a bunch of Wagner guys and, like, you know, a bunch of Wagner prisoners, rapists, murderers, and you give them a gun, throw them in Ukraine, let them kill a bunch, send them back to Russia. Oh my God, they killed somebody. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? 3 of them were pedophiles? I mean, he pardoned all of them. Yeah, there's going to be some disgusting people in there. He decided to pardon every single one. Why not just, like, pardon the non-violent ones? Be like, look, I completed my commitment. No one would have gotten angry at him outside of the most fringe of the fringe. That's what J.D. Vance suggested, but no, he just had to pardon everyone. He had to make storming the Capitol a act of martyrdom. Dylan, is Russia willing to give up anything meaningful? We don't know. I honestly don't know. I have been given no indication that the Russian mentality about being able to make meaningful concessions has changed. I have not been given any indication. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm right. The Russian system is very insular, and it's very hard to understand exactly what, like, all the Russian oligarchs and what the Russian elite and Putin is exactly thinking behind that noggin. I mean, you can listen to what he says, and I believe he believes the ideological stuff of what he says. But I also don't think he would publicly say, holy shit, we're going to run out of artillery. Ah! you know, if he was about to, right? He wouldn't say that. So I don't know how bad it is. And I don't know how hard-headed he is when it comes to like the complete fulfillment of his ideological goal. If he thinks that he can just continue the war another day and he sets up a foundation, we can set up the war again, I think he'd be much more willing to make concessions. But that's the difficulty. We need to make it so he can't do that again and find peace. Another J6er got in trouble for being a pedo. They got a second chance and then wasted it on kitty diddling. Could you imagine spending the last 3-4 years fundraising for like funds to get somebody out of prison or something? And that, gosh, my goodness, terrible. Thank you for speaking into the mic. Look, I lean back. It's a problem. This is a new mic. I'm not used to this mic. I had to buy the mic I could buy. And I'm trying to get another mic. It's on the Amazon wish list if anybody wants crisper audio for the Dylan Burns TV stream. Exclamation point wish list in chat. Lost my other mic in the fire. Dylan, don't people argue that 2022 Istanbul arguably had Russia in a worse position? They demanded insane shit then. I just can't see them even allowing EU troops, let alone other stuff. Well, here's the thing, right? The Istanbul agreement is bad. We shouldn't even take the Istanbul agreement. The Istanbul agreement is just a recipe for another war. If Trump accepts something similar to the Istanbul agreement, and his Middle East peace envoy did suggest a Istanbul framework would be a good idea, that is just saying, I want this war just later. I just don't want this war right now. That's what Trump would be declaring. I don't want this war now. I want the next president to deal with it. That is what Trump would be declaring by doing. Now, I don't know that's what they're going to do. But yeah, I never bought the Istanbul Agreement Boris Johnson bullshit, and I never bought that it was just, oh, it's such a normal peaceful deal. They would have left, all that would have needed to be said is that they wouldn't join NATO, and Russia would have left Ukraine for, no, bullshit. The agreement's been public forever. You can go read it. The terms are crazy. Hey, Dylan, from Dnipro, Ukraine. Well, hello, Rahan. Welcome to today's stream. Okay. I think that is enough on that. Also, did you see that the Romanian parliament passed a law to allow the shooting down of drones that illegally enter Romania's airspace? Why did they need to do this? Why did the Romanian parliament need to pass a law to say we could shoot down threats to our country? Was it really not on the books? I call bullshit, honestly. Was it really not on the books that if there is drones flying into your country, or your country's being attacked, or you think that something could blow up and hurt one of your people, that you can't just shoot it down? That wasn't on the books. I just call bullshit. It must have been on the books. They've just chosen not to do it. There's no way. The Senate plenary adopted on Wednesday, as a decision-making body, the legislative project on the control of the use of airspace, which regulates the procedures by which the Army can shoot down drones that illegally enter Romania's airspace. The legislative initiative aims to regulate a series of measures to control the use of national airspace, establishing the authorities and institutions that have competences in taking measures to prevent and counter the use of national airspace by aircraft, unmanned aircraft systems, and other aerial vehicles. There were 79 votes for, 11 against. 11 against. Who in Romania is saying, nah, don't shoot it down. Let that shit go straight to the cat. Who is that? Who are those 11 people? How much of a self-hating, spineless jelly skeleton sellout do you have to be to vote against a law that says if there are drones entering our airspace, shoot it down? You want to know the only way I could figure this out? This is the only way I could figure this out. Because it can't be that they're like, oh, there's a drone flying towards Romania. It could kill some people, but we don't want to anger the Russians if they felt like killing some of our people. You know, it can't be that. So what I'm imagining is that they're scared. This is the only explanation I could imagine. They're scared that it could interfere with Russian combat operations. See, the Russians have started this habit of having their missiles and drones enter European airspace, turn around, and then hit Ukraine. So they go into Moldova, or they go into Romania, or they go into Poland, and then they turn around, and then they hit Ukraine. Now, sometimes it's just for like 20 seconds, 25 seconds. But that's all you need to normalize and push the envelope. And so what I think that they're probably fearful of, if I was to somehow decode it, is that they're fearful that the drones that are entering Romanian airspace and then turning around and hitting Ukrainian cities are not meant to hit Romania. So just let them hit Ukrainian cities. Because if we shoot them down, maybe the Russians will get angry at us and retaliate. It is basically saying allow other countries to use our airspace to bomb Ukraine in the hope that they won't take that anger out on us. It is jelly spine incarnate. Jelly spine incarnate from behind the shield of NATO. That's some weak stuff. It is weak. It's incredibly weak. Think about the standard that sets. I mean, that's the type of thing where if the Russians relaunch a war in 4 to 5 years, there's a piss poor peace agreement, Romania could be right smack dab in the middle of another war, having its airspace used to bomb. Or, let's say Romania somehow avoids a different European war. Let's say there's an insurgency in Belarus or whatever. Is Romania's airspace just easy pickings if it becomes convenient to use? Anyway, they passed the law, so those, like, dude's opinion doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But the fact that they felt it was necessary to pass a law to shoot down drones in your airspace is baffling. Absolutely baffling. Okay, now it's time to talk about, you know what, I was going to do the PKK next, but let's do the CHIP Act next, actually. I feel like the CHIPS Act. CHIPS Act, and then we can do the PKK. That's what I'm thinking. So, the CHIPS and Science Act was passed by the Biden administration, and it invested billions upon billions of dollars into microchip manufacturing in the United States, as well as coercing tens of billions of dollars of investment from private companies in the same manufacturing fields. And they were building up factories in places like Arizona and New Mexico, like in that area of the country. These factories were being built. And the reason that the White House believed that it was necessary to build up these factories is that during C-19, we saw how supply chain crises can affect markets. And then we saw, on top of the problem with supply chains, how much we just saw it then, we kind of knew it. But we put all of our eggs in the microchip basket that is Taiwan, or I guess you could say the Taiwanese peninsula instead of the microchip basket. And if China was to conquer Taiwan, or if Taiwan was to become the center of a war to reconquer Taiwan and even win, there's a high likelihood that a lot of that microchip manufacturing would be destroyed. Taiwan has one of the most urbanly dense cities in the world. If you were to exclude the mountainous regions of Taiwan would be one of the most population-dense countries in the world, if not the most population-dense country in the world. So a bombing campaign to destroy its microchip manufacturing would not only be economically destructive, but also population-wise, it would be a humanitarian disaster. But for that scenario, the United States would want manufacturing in the United States because it cannot just bet everything on Taiwan. And if there's a supply chain crisis, they want their own alternatives. Plus, manufacturing in the United States. Biden's not going to, snub that. 115,000 jobs, 78,000 construction jobs, 35,000 production jobs long term making these microchips. Not going to snub that either. Then Biden stepped out of the White House and Trump stepped in. And now my thought was that Trump was going to keep the Chips and Science Act, keep these factories, and just be there for the ribbon cutting ceremonies and take the credit. Because to me, that's like the smart thing to do, right? Is to look at the successful initiatives of your political opponents and you adopt them as your own. Adopt them as your own. If something works, make it your flag so that people think of those factories and then they think of Trump, not Biden. That would be the effort he would want to go into. And it's not like he's a bad marketer. I mean, he could certainly try. But that's not what's happening. Instead, even though the Chips and Science Act was passed by Congress, a bipartisan majority, and it has already been made law, the funds have already been allocated, the Chips and Science Act is reportedly going to die because Trump is finding another way through mass firings of staff to kill the Chips and Science Act. Listen to this. Billions of dollars in U.S. Chips and Act grants are imperiled, possibly dead, with expected departures of hundreds of NIST workers who have administered the act and helped dozens of companies sign commitments to receive grants. Various news outlets and analysts have spoken to workers expected to get notices of firing this week because they are considered probationary workers. Under the heading of probationary are workers with less than 2 years of service, including those receiving promotions in the past 2 years. Elon Musk, as head of the Department of Government Efficiency, has used this approach to lay off thousands of workers in other government agencies, such as USAID. So what they're doing is they're imperiling the funding to the workers that are administrating this, and therefore stopping the implementation of a congressionally mandated piece of legislation that was bipartisan and has already passed. They're not getting a majority of the public against this and then passing legislation to stop it. They're not getting the House involved at all. The legislative check of the checks and balances is basically asleep. And so, and the judges are doing everything they can to scramble while the administration is advocating for their removal of the judges that are acting as roadblocks to his unconstitutional action. And so what has happened is the Chips and Science Act, after being passed by a bipartisan majority, being supported by a majority of the American public, who want to see high-profile manufacturing of high-tech goods in the United States, is now seeing that legislation die. And it's being killed by the man who is supposed to be the bane of neoliberalism, supposed to be the bane of the exportation of American jobs, the man who's talking about the need to bring American jobs from overseas back to the United States, bring the manufacturing jobs here, don't make them there, make American, buy American. Now, of course, he's made a lot of his products in China. He has a record of exporting jobs overseas and has let jobs be exported overseas and has given tax breaks to companies for them not to export their jobs overseas. And then those companies did it anyway, and he did nothing. Carrier is a great example of that. For anybody who remembers the Carrier scandal. All these scandals just kind of come and go as they please. But I mean, that was a big deal to those families who lost their jobs. Donald Trump likes the aesthetics of reindustrialization. Donald Trump likes the aesthetics of investing in manufacturing and bringing those jobs back. And this fulfilled those check boxes. You want to know the check box it didn't fulfill? Biden still could have claimed it. See, for Trump to take this strategy that I would have recommended him, which is to take the flag of the Chips and Science Act, run with it, and say, we're reindustrializing. I said we're bringing our jobs back. You want to know when these factories were going to open? Like 2027 and stuff. Like these factories, some of them were scheduled to open while Trump was still in office. He could have literally been there at the ribbon cutting. The problem is Biden and Democrats probably would have tried to claim it too. And so Trump would have gotten into a battle of PR, which maybe he could have won. And either way, it would have been better for the country, for these manufacturing jobs to be here, for these factories to be here, for our supply chains to be shorter, for such a vital part of our economy. This technological good which powers computers that everybody in the country uses, whether it's in their pocket or on a desktop. The plant in Phoenix was supposed to open this year, as Full Moon just pointed out in chat. The TSMC plant in Phoenix, Arizona. But because Biden could claim it, and this is what I genuinely believe, because I think Biden could claim it, because the Democrats could have tried to claim it, might have had some success, might have not had some success. He's the man from the bully pulpit, probably could have made more noise. But because they could have tried to, and because maybe it is part in his mind of Biden's legacy, he's killing the act. He's killing an act that's bipartisan supported because the whole country can see it's good. The Congress can see it's good. But Trump can't. Or maybe he could, but because Biden's name's on it, it has to die. This is choosing spite over the country. This is choosing spite over 115,000 jobs. This is choosing spite over manufacturing in the United States and the aesthetic of what he was starting his campaign back in 2015 on. This is just politics for good old-fashioned spite. This is the image of Trump of the spiteful man who saw Obama mock him and then went into politics because of it. This is a man fueled by spite, not love of country. And so he chose spite over country. And now 115,000 jobs could very well go down the toilet if nobody does anything. If Congress does not assert its authority, which right now it shows no intention of doing so. Good old-fashioned spite. Those goddamn libs are teaching our kids about Transnistria. Yeah, I can't believe it. Ridiculous. Well, I mean, guess it gives the Europeans the opportunity to get ahead of us on this. Okay, next story. Oh, I mean, I said I was going to do the Kurdish story next, but can I just quickly say, I don't like this pick. I don't like Slotkin as the pick to deliver the response to Trump's joint address. So for those of you who don't know, the State of the Union address is next week. Whoa, right? What the fuck? That came out of nowhere. But yeah, no, it's next Wednesday. The State of the Union is next Wednesday. And Trump has to give that before Congress, as he is basically usurping Congress's authority over the power of the purse. It's kind of wild. But that's happening next week. And the Democrats are trying to prepare its response. And Chuck Schumer has picked Slotkin. Former Representative Slotkin, now senator, first-term senator, to represent the Democrats in response. Now, I don't want to be that guy, but I will be that guy. I don't know if I like this pick. Okay, I'll have to see how she performs. I'll have to see what issues she chooses to focus on. But Slotkin is hardcore anti-Medicare for all. Slotkin is like, she was an advisor for George W. Bush on national security. She's against student debt relief. She voted for the Lincoln Riley Act. She is, I would say, not someone I would make the standard bearer for the Democratic Party. Now, in a moment like this, I think the Democratic Party needs big ideas. And I think we need somebody out there with big ideas. Now, that doesn't mean, I think somebody maybe could think that big ideas and kitchen top issues are not the same, but I think they can be the same. And I think, you know, showing that Democrats have a healthcare plan, a public option, which was Biden's healthcare plan, even though we never heard about it once he got into the White House. Hearing about that, hearing everybody covered by healthcare instead of somebody who says he has a concept of a plan, you know, that's the type of stuff I would like to hear. I want bold plans, ambitious plans. The Democratic Party needs big ideas right now to tell the American people not only we're against Trump, but we're for something that could change the country. Not, I think a 5% tax credit on, no. Big ideas, simple ideas, punchy ideas that are clear and obvious how they can help working people and be focused on working people. And working people as a general group, not just trying to hit like a checklist of, okay, touch this interest group, touch this interest group next, touch this interest group next. Anyway, I hope that's the message she hits on tomorrow. Big ideas, economy, and I'm hearing that they're going to talk about the economy. In fact, let me read this. Democratic leaders signaled Slotkin's speech could focus on economic issues, with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries saying in a statement she'd communicate about the cost of living and protecting Medicaid and Medicare as GOP lawmakers mull cuts to certain safety net programs in their planned party line budget. Polling showed that voter discontent about the economy and rising inflation, as well as immigration, were significant factors in Republicans winning unified control of the government last fall. But the American public also has not seen the economy improve in their mind. They are not polling as the economy has recovered now that Trump has entered the White House. So that's not polling well. So that is something that they can still hit on. For example, the price of eggs. Hell, you can even say that J.D. Vance complained about it on the campaign trail. The kitchen tabletop issue I think can do well. We'll have to see next week how she does. But I'm nervous about it. What is this? This is their actual Twitter account. Mark Kern, aka Grums, may be an imperfect messenger, but his voice is still one the world needs to hear. Wokeness is on the back foot, but it's not completely down and out. People like him could be the ones to finally land a knockout punch. This is supposed to be like a serious news outlet, by the way.
A curd is a curd.
The Dems are completely out of their depth. We need drastic action and fast. Milquetoast policy is not enough anymore.
Amen. Right on the money, Miles Hill. Right on the money. We don't need we need something that makes people think like, huh, that's a plan. I guess that can help me. I don't know if it'll work, but that's a plan. If they can pull that off tomorrow, I mean, not tomorrow, next week, then it'll be an okay response. What's with this picture choice? This is like, Grums is like a video game commentator who's like, basically like very anti-woke. Like, oh, those woke, etc. Why is RT boosting him? And why is Russia Today putting his head over this as he grabs a black woman's face with the message of DEI is dying? This is all weird. This is a weird picture. It's weird that he's being shouted out. And like a whole it's like a whole thread for this guy. Like a whole thread. My goodness. Strange. Oh, one last thing on Ukraine. I'm sorry, I keep on saying we're going to talk about Turkey, but then I keep kicking it down the road. They have an article about him on RT. Listen to gaming's most important voice standing up to DEI. By a high-profile gaming journalist who wishes to remain anonymous. Never really liked Blizzard anyway. Where were we? Oh, yes. We were actually going to talk about, I said this one last thing about Ukraine. There has been some pushback on Ukraine from the House. 40 lawmakers have urged Trump to stop supporting Putin's illegal war. Basically, his parroting of Russian talking points and Russian propaganda. Let me read you this letter from these 40 lawmakers. Mr. President, earlier this week, the United States voted against the United Nations General Assembly resolution advancing a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in Ukraine on the third anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Failing to condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine's weakens U.S. national security, encourages Putin's effort to quash Ukraine's right to exist, and reflects a might makes right policy that will lead to more war and less prosperity for the rest of the 21st century. The vote against the resolution could result in serious risk for the United States and its interests around the world. It emboldens China, which will take the lesson of U.S. acceptance of such invasions as a green light to use its rapidly growing and modernizing People's Liberation Army to attack and seize Taiwan. When the United States votes with Belarus, a Russian puppet state, and North Korea, a failed rogue nuclear-armed pariah, and against countries like Ireland and Australia, it sends a harmful signal. Siding with the world's dictators and against its democracies empowers those dictators to continue to oppress their people, attack others, and make the world a poorer and more violent place. Siding against democracies, including our longest-standing and closest allies, undercuts our own democratic system and has made us the richest, most powerful country in history. We urge you to change your position considering these realities. The best way to end the war in Ukraine is to support Ukraine with arms, not give aid and comfort to Russia, its puppets, and client states, and dictators around the world. Congress will work with you in a bipartisan and overwhelming manner if you move to continue and deepen support for Ukraine. Strengthen our national security and force Russia to end its war of aggression, including by ensuring any negotiations result in a just, durable peace, not a reward for seizing territory by force. We look forward to working with you towards such a policy. Sincerely, and then you get all of the ranking members. You get Adam Smith. You get, who's the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee. You get Gregory Meeks. You get Joaquin Castro. You have a bunch of names you might recommend here. Probably some that you do not as well. Jim Costa. Pramila Jayapal. Pramila Jayapal. Can I just give some credit to Pramila Jayapal for this? For her saying that the best way to support Ukraine right now is to give them support necessary to give them leverage and beat off the invasion. I want to give progressives credit for that. I want to give progressives credit for beating back Russophilic narratives and kicking off the propaganda of Europe's most dangerous empire. Jason Crow, Ted Lieu, Joe County. But you want to notice something when you go through these names? How many Republicans do you notice in this list? Does anybody see a Republican in here? How many Republicans do you guys see in this list? See Ro Khanna. I don't see any Republicans in this list. What is needed within the party is the party to stand up. The Republican Party to stand up to Trump. Make it clear that he's not going to get his legislative agenda passed unless he works with Congress, both in assuring that their power of the purse is still with them and assuring the checks and balances that, maintain the country, but also national security priorities, which should be one of the most basic jobs. My rep, Victoria Spartz, on it. She's from Ukraine. Oh, God. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. But Victoria Spartz attacked her home country the day her home village was bombed by the Russians. She's not good. She's very bad. And she pushes the Russian narratives too. I've seen her do it. Dylan, do you think Trump just wants old school imperialism? I mean, he seems to want to let Russia carve up Ukraine. He's rambled about making Canada the 51st state, and he seems to be weaker on protecting Taiwan from China. Plus, all the Republicans were talking about invading Mexico just a year ago, and they just designated multiple cartels as terrorist organizations, opening up the possibility of drone striking Mexico, which Elon Musk, for the peacemaking man he was, seems to be very excited about drone striking Mexico. So, if I'm being honest with you, yes, I do think Trump likes old school. I think the deal he wanted with Ukraine was an old school client state deal of you give us our resources and we will make sure that the rump state that survived continues to exist, maybe. Like that's old school imperialism. It's not working beneficially with your allies. It's give us your resources and maybe we'll consider, it's not good. Yeah, no, it's not good for our allies, encouraging them to work with us. It's not good for bringing new allies to the table, and I think it ruins our reputation on the international stage. So I do think that he is of a more old-style imperialism, yes. I don't know. I don't think it comes from, like, some ideological commitment to, like, I believe that was the best way to do it back in the day. I just think that the way he does geopolitics and politics ends up falling that way when you put him on the international stage. Oh, we want Greenland? Let's just fucking... Then we'll just tell them we're going to take it until they give us what we want. And if they don't give us what we want, who knows? Can you verify if there are counterattacks around Tourette's that are successful? I see ISU updating some small advances for Ukraine around there. I mean, like, I've heard about this, but I don't want to like get people overexcited, because when we talk about like counterattacks, or there was a counterattack here, counterattack there, if we're talking about like 1 square kilometer of territory, should I make a segment about that? Like, I don't know. If you guys are curious as to what exactly is going on, I will show you, okay? I will show you guys what's going on. Okay. So this map is from the 21st. So this is I have brought the map back around Tourette's to the 21st. So about 5-6 days ago, right? So this is the Battle of Tourette's. This city of Tourette's, the Ukrainians have been fighting a very brutal battle over this city, right? I brought us back to the 14th. I think it gets the point across clearer. And at the start of February, it was looking like the battle was kind of reaching its crescendo. The Ukrainians had largely been pushed to the edges of the city. The Russians had taken most of the city center. They had taken everything solid to the south of the city. While their flanks were not secure, they were getting ready to expand them. And to the left, they were trying to expand them. It looked like the general trend was towards Russia catching Tourette's. Then the Ukrainians launched a localized counterattack. And the blue here is Ukraine. The red here is Russia. The yellow is unknown. So that's the contested. That's what they're fighting over, so to speak. Check how this has changed in the last, let's just say, 10 days. That's the counteroffensive that people are talking about. If you guys want an idea about the scale, they're back into the city center of Tourette's. That's what's happened. They've been able to fight all the way back into the Tourette's city center, and they are now rough. I don't know if I would say they've controlled 50% of the city again, but they've been able to push the Russians back a significant amount of blocks of the city, both in the north, northeast, and the northwest. That's what the counteroffensive is. It's real. Whether it holds, whether it's expanded upon, it depends upon how much manpower the Ukrainians have localized around Tourette's. It depends about how much gas the Russians still have in the tank around Tourette's, because they wanted to continue the attack, the Russians around Tourette's. They wanted to capture Tourette's, not just hold what they have. And if the Ukrainians have the munitions necessary to support such an operation. Because if they were able to push the Russians out of Tourette's, obviously that would be a massive victory. But I think more likely they take back a large portion of Tourette's, and then the Battle of Tourette's continues along the new fault lines, where the Russians then have to try to push back all the land they just lost. Anyway, that's when you're asking me about what's going on in Tourette's. That's generally what's going on in Tourette's right now. The words I'm getting about it is that it's going good. They are making progress. It's positive. Of course, but going on the attack takes casualties. How much progress they get will be dependent on the coming days. But in the last 12 days, they've made significant progress around Tourette's. Now that we're here, let me just go check out everything else. Damn, not good out around Vasilinovo-Silka. Unsurprisingly, the Russians are gaining ground quickly there. Now that they've lost their main defensive point. Capturing the villages around here. I'm worried about its proximity to... I mean, there's a lot of villages in this area that they're probably going to bowl over. It's not going to be good. Okay, now I think we can talk about the PKK. I think now is the time to talk about probably the most historic news of the day, even though it's not going to get a lot of attention. I do stand by this being extremely historic news. Dylan, wasn't there a similar mineral deal trying to be made under Biden? There was some sort of mineral deal being made under Biden, but it wasn't give us all your minerals. And now the new deal that's been negotiated by the Ukrainians and the Americans is not give us all your minerals. It's a joint investment fund, which is, you know, what you would have expected originally. So, we just had a pretty historic update. A very, very historic update. After a nearly 40-year-long insurgency, and after 25 years in prison, and 40,000 deaths, mostly on the Kurdish side, but 40,000 deaths due to the insurgency, the leader of the Kurdistan Workers' Party and the icon on all their memorabilia, if you know anybody that's anywhere connected to any subsidiary, you see his face on everything, on all their flags, on all their books, they love Absalon. They love Abo. He has come out from within Turkish imprisonment and announced that he believes that the Kurdistan Workers' Party, otherwise known as the PKK, the Kurdish communist guerrilla movement against Turkey, should lay down its arms and disband. This is a gigantic moment. Now, this didn't come completely out of nowhere, though. It actually was not that long ago when an ally of Erdogan, his name is, I believe, like Baseli or like Delvit Baseli. I'm sorry, I'm not Turkish. I'm not great at pronouncing the names, but he's an ultra-nationalist ally of Erdogan, and he announced that it would be a good idea if maybe they left, or maybe they would consider letting Öcalan out of prison if Öcalan came out and announced that, you know, peace was coming to the land, the war against Turkey is over, and asked for the PKK to lay down its arms. And then Öcalan, who is a gigantic figure in the Kurdish community, not all Kurds like Öcalan, but a lot of Kurds do, particularly those in Turkey who are active in like the Kurdish struggle for more representation in the country. Him being released would be big. It could be big for the Turkish relationship with the Kurdish community. Him telling the PKK to put down its arms could be big, because then it could lead to, you know, Turkish soldiers no longer having to fight against this insurgency. It could maybe lead to a lessening of tensions in Syria.
Dylan, are you still Ukraine? Sorry, I haven't had much time to keep up with you recently.
No, I am not in Ukraine. I'm in the United States, but I plan to go back to Ukraine next month if I can get my affairs in order fast enough. But that is dependent upon, me getting my gear and paperwork in order in time. Thank you for the $10. Where was I? God. Damn it. I know it was on this topic. I just, when it happens in the middle of a sentence, I always like, it always sets me off. Anyway, Abdullah Öcalan comes out, makes this statement, but it was only after this other ultra-nationalist ally of Erdogan came out and said it would maybe be a good idea if he came out, made the statement, called for the PKK to disarm, and then under those conditions, Abo could be let out. He could be let out, he could go back to his home at 75 years of age after 25 years in a Turkish prison cell, in a maximum security prison, because he's definitely Turkish enemy number one, right? So he says that, and this is a big surprise, because Erdogan's ultra-nationalist ally is saying to let out what the Turkish government sees as basically the terrorist in chief of the Kurdish terrorist movement, PKK. That's how they view it, because of the PKK's different attacks over the years, including bombings and shootings and all sorts of stuff, assassinations and mostly attacks on Turkish soldiers, but those attacks have not been solely restricted to Turkish military personnel. There have been instances where civilians have died. And so for them to come out and say that, for the ultra-nationalist wing to say it was a big thing. And then it was followed with this. Öcalan coming out and calling for the group to put down its arms. Now, the first thing is, will the PKK put down its arms? Well, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say exactly how much influence Abdullah Öcalan has over the Kurdistan Workers' Party after 25 years in prison. But let me tell you, from all the people that I know that's within that movement, like that dude is on every flag. They give him like a cute nickname. It's like Abo or something. They love that dude. He's got basically like a cult of personality within not only the Kurdistan Workers' Party, but that goes into, it's like Apo. Yeah, that goes into Syria. A lot of the people fighting in Syria as part of the SDF, the majority of them, or actually I don't know if it's a majority anymore, but I think it might actually have been changed up to a majority were Arabs, but I don't know if that's the case now. But a very large portion of the fighting force are Kurds tied to the YPG and the YPJ, which have deep ties to the Kurdistan Workers' Party. And if you check out these YPJ fighters and the type of memorabilia they're holding around his books, which he has a lot of books on, like this type of socialist collectivism, democratic centralism. I forget exactly, but it's democratic confederalism, I believe, is how they pitch it. They got those books. They got his face on the wall. They got his face on flags, on these yellow flags they fly everywhere. He's like a little cult leader, and I'm saying that just to be blunt about it. They treat him like a cult icon. They have his face on places the way the Russians have Putin's face on weird places. In fact, I would say his face might even be more around everywhere. It's not as much as it used to be. Definitely in Syria, they've died it down a lot. But I think that icon, like him, carries significant weight. And that him calling for this is going to cause the organization to reflect on disarming and dissolving. But I don't think that they're going to disarm and dissolve and roll over. I think that the only way that the Kurdistan Workers' Party is truly going to dissolve is if, for example, there are concessions that make them think that Kurds can live as integrated members of Turkish society. What does that mean? It means that the Kurdish politicians that have been jailed outside of Öcalan have to be released. They have to be released. All of the democratically elected mayors from southeastern Turkey and the eastern parts of Turkey and the Kurdish communities, they have to be released. They have to be released as well. The Kurds have to be allowed to elect their own leaders, and the Kurds have to be allowed to rule themselves to some degree. Now, when I say rule themselves to some degree, I'm not saying it has to be like the Kurdistan regional government in Iraq. I'm not saying that. But the federal government cannot just bust in the door and start arresting government officials every time they implement local policies on language or local curriculum or whatever, if they want to. They have to allow them to rule themselves to some extent. I mean, the Kurdish people are the largest people without a state, ethnicity without a state. That is significant. And they have their own culture and history. And so I think that giving it the respect that it deserves should not be a big ask if the benefit for that is the ending of over 40 years of war. I mean, think about how the position of the Kurdistan Worker Parties has changed. Originally in the 80s, they wanted an independent Kurdish state. Then in the last decade, it's moderated to like more autonomy. Then to find a settlement, you'll probably be able to get them to compromise further to maybe not even like a Kurdistan regional government type situation, but just some amount of like regional autonomy. Maybe not even like a local, regional parliament, but some amount of like, okay, over here you have like a situation where they can have these laws for local language and culture language lessons, and they can, it might just be that for all we know. But for the opportunity that this offers Turkey to make peace within its borders, to make peace outside of its borders, in Syria as well. And let me tell you something. The Syrian SDF officials have reacted very positively to this. They love this idea because if the Turks find peace with the PKK, what justification could Turkey find for invading Syria and bombing Kurdish villages or the city of Rojava? What justification could they invent? It'd be a lot harder. You would be undercutting the justification for their invasion and the continued bombing campaign that is allowing fighting to continue in northeastern Syria unabated, despite any peace deal, ceasefire, whatever people talk about. The bombing still continues. For that to stop, not only would that be a huge humanitarian gain for the people of northeastern Syria, but it would allow them to really begin the process of rebuilding and reintegration with the Syrian state. And it would make the process of reintegration into the Syrian state a much less awkward for the government in Damascus, considering how their relationship with Turkey. So, to me, if this happens, this is good. This is very good. But it's going to be dependent upon the Turks making some amount of compromises when it comes to the Kurds. And it's going to be dependent upon Abdullah Öcalan's influence and the people being tired of war enough to put down their arms and go home and live amongst themselves. And for the Turkish government to stop their repressive attitudes towards not only Kurdish politicians, but Kurdish protesters and Kurdish journalists. So that like crushing of the civil society and the press, the Kurds, I doubt they're going to want that. I doubt they're going to want a Turkish-dominated government to suppress their press. So they're going to have to allow them to have their own civil society. If they can do that and make those sacrifices from that centralization of control, the gains are so bountiful. In Syria, peace in Turkey, rebuilding in Turkey, social cohesion. Let's just see if, but I mean, I want it. I want it bad. We'll have to wait and see if, number one, Öcalan is released. And so that they make good on that promise. And that the PKK really does disarm. And concessions are made. We'll have to wait for these steps to come. Because if you send the signal that you're willing to let go of Öcalan, that tells me that you're willing to probably make some concessions. But if they're not, then this is all for naught. Because the PKK is not going to put down its guns for nothing. I also want to throw out there that another thing that makes this more likely to succeed, in my mind, is that Erdogan's constitutional term ends in 3 years. And he wants the constitutional change so he can rule past 2028 after winning the last Turkish election. But in order to do that, he's going to need more support. And in order to get that support, considering his legislative issues and the poor performance in the last elections, he might need the Kurdish community. And so I think part of this is not only so he can put the feather in his cap of making peace with the PKK, but also so he can try to win over more Kurdish votes. So this is not just purely like, oh, this is completely based upon how can we find peace between our peoples. That's a pure interest. There are also some clear self-interested political interests as well, which in this case might actually contribute to peace. God help us. Hopefully it does. Free Kurdistan, to be quite honest. I mean, look, an independent Kurdish state would be great. I don't think that's happening in Turkey anytime soon. And I don't think that the PKK's violent struggle is anywhere closer to getting us that state. I think they could maybe get compromises from the government, get them to stop harassing the Kurds in Syria, but I just don't think they're going to get I just don't think we're anywhere close to that. I think we're much closer to a Turkish invasion of northeastern Syria if a settlement's not found with the Damascus government. And that scares me enough that I can understand Aslan's motivations. He needs the DEM. So for those of you who don't know, the DEM, that is the majority of the world's Kurds are in Turkey. There's Kurds in Iran, there's Kurds in Syria, you know, there's Kurds, of course, in other places that have migrated. But the majority of the world's Kurds are in Turkey. 15 to 20% of the Turkey's populations are Kurds. Very large percentage. And their party is, the Kurdish party is the DEM, and that's the party they've been suppressing. And so I think that I think that there's maybe an approach of, if we can legalize our Kurdish activism in the state and have a civil society that's functioning, then we're much more likely to achieve goals by compromising here, and then working in the system to try to get our goals achieved, then continued violent struggle in the mountains. Also, it could stop an invasion of northeastern Syria, which I think that is probably a big immediate motivation. I still believe that the Kurds very well do deserve a country, but I also, you know, we have to also be practical about the immediate. And I'm sure Turks would probably like to hear that their soldiers aren't going to have to go into northeastern Syria. The Kurds will be thankful and be allies in the parliament. Yeah, I mean, I think I have some words actually from this. One second, let me read you some reactions. And actually, I think it'd be interesting to read his statement from Aslan. I am making a call for the laying down of arms, and I take on the historical responsibility of this call, Aslan said in a letter made public by Turkey's pro-Kurdish Dem party members. In his message on Thursday, Aslan said that the armed struggle had run its course, though he also urged Turkey to show respect for ethnic minorities, freedom of expression, and the rights to democratic self-organization. Aslan wants his party to hold Congress and to formally agree to dissolve itself, they quoted him as saying. A Dem party delegation visited Aslan on Thursday in person on his on the Amrali Island, that's his like prison island compound just for him, and later delivered his message in nearby Istanbul. A photo of them together with Aslan projected onto the wall behind them. There was no immediate response from the PKK headquarters. By the way, that's the most modern photo we've had in Aslan in years. There was no immediate response from the PKK headquarters in the mountains of northern Iraq, while Kurdish-led forces in Syria said Aslan's message was positive. In their first reaction to Aslan's appeal from Erdogan's ruling AK party, its deputy chairman, Ekfan Allah, said Turkey would be free of its shackles if the PKK truly laid down its arms. Well, you know, I think he made the right call, honestly, Aslan. If it prevents the reignition of another wave in the Syrian civil war and gives them a path forward in Turkey, then I understand it. And plus, like, there's nothing ever saying that the Kurds, if it was all a backstabbing, they couldn't just go back into the mountains. Sounds like surrender to me. I get it. Well, I mean, like, what's your plan then, sir? I mean, look, I'm not trying to be like mean or whatever, but I don't see a plan for the Kurds to get any immediate pathway for them to get a state in Turkey. And I don't see the sentiment changing on that anytime soon. And they've been fighting since the 80s. It's been 40 years. I think what's being achieved is laudable considering the circumstances and what the alternatives are. Turkey cannot defeat the PKK. Kurds cannot create a separate state. Yeah, that's basically it, Stepson. Yeah, you're on the money there. Giving up their arms is sort of unreasonable. Yeah, I mean, the whole point is like you're disarming because the Turkey views the PKK as a terror group. So if those fighters are going to reintegrate into society, they're going to want them to be like, okay, stop being a terror group, end a terror group. So that's, yes, in order to get this deal, they would probably have to disarm, yeah. If they don't give up their arms, then there's no deal. Oh, one last thing I wanted to throw out there. Did you see Trump is trying to get our military equipment back from the Afghan Taliban? Listen to this. President-elect Donald Trump says that future financial assistance to Afghanistan will be contingent upon the return of U.S. military equipment by the Taliban leaders currently in power. Trump's remarks at a Sunday rally in Washington on the eve of his January 20th inauguration have heightened uncertainty regarding his administrative stance on the crisis-hit South Asian nation. The Biden administration gave billions of dollars to the Taliban. They gave our military equipment, a big chunk of it to the enemy, Trump said. If we're going to pay billions of dollars a year, tell them we're not going to give them the money unless they give back our military equipment. So we will give them a couple of bucks. We want the military equipment back, Trump stated without elaborating. A report issued by the U.S. Defense Department revealed that approximately $7 billion worth of military equipment was left behind in Afghanistan following the withdrawal. The equipment in question, which includes aircraft, air-to-ground munitions, military vehicles, weapons, communications equipment, and other materials, was seized by the Taliban. The de facto Afghan rulers have since repeatedly displayed the U.S. military gear in their so-called Victory Day celebrations over the past 3 years. The foreign troop exit stemmed from the February 2020. Yeah, we already know about that. The billions of dollars that Trump repeatedly has referred to are likely the cash shipments being channeled through the UN and non-government organizations to support humanitarian programs in Afghanistan. Washington remains the primary donor and has spent approximately $3 billion in humanitarian aid since the U.S. withdrawal. Thomas Running from the Independent Afghanistan Analyst Network warned of challenges for the Taliban under the Trump administration. He noted that some members of Congress and the incoming administration officials took part in the 20-year U.S. mission in Afghanistan and have been highly critical of the Taliban. Despite this, he stated that continuing regional terrorism is a significant concern in Washington, and it could potentially encourage the Trump administration to seek cooperation with the Taliban to combat terrorist organizations, including the Afghanistan-based affiliate of the Islamic State terrorist organization known as IS-Khorasan, ISIS in Afghanistan. So it's a question of, do you work with Afghanistan, do you send Afghanistan aid to help the humanitarian situation, and maybe see if you can work with them on terrorism, or do you not send them aid, screw the humanitarian situation, and say, well, if you want humanitarian aid, you're going to have to give us some military gear back on top of fighting the terrorists with us. That's basically the calculation Trump is trying to make. Earlier this month, Taliban Deputy Foreign Minister Mohammed Abbas commented Trump as a decisive and courageous leader. He suggested Trump should reconsider Biden's policy and adopt a new approach. We want to build a good relations with the international.
A curd is a curd.
Bam is Rad got a Tier 1 subscription. Hey Dylan, nice to see ya. It's been a while. What do you think are the odds Trump will send U.S. troops into Mexico in the next 4 years?
What are the odds that Trump will send U.S. troops into Mexico? Well, they've gone up since he's designated the cartels as terrorist organizations. And the reason it's gone up is that by designating the cartels as terrorist organizations, the president could technically use the AOMF, the Authorization for Use of Military Force, after 9/11 to go after them. We basically gave the president and our government the authority to go after terrorism carte blanche. And by designating the cartels as terrorist groups, that allows the president to go after them carte blanche, which would mean drone strikes in Mexico without congressional approval. Now, a full-scale military invasion and the funds allocated for it would almost certainly need to pass the House because you would need money for it, and you can't just pop that out of nowhere. But also, the House has been quite subservient to Trump when he tries to take away the power of the purse interest from the House, and they have a direct interest in holding on to it and to holding on to the check and balance system that gives them power and influence. But I mean, we can't make them take their own power. They have to take it for themselves. And if they're too, well, spineless, if their spine is made of jelly, I can't make them do that, no? Wish I could. Wish I could. Really, really do. Okay. Hey, did somebody just... Oh my goodness.
Burns
Xanatos Dolmont.
Morally
Thank you so much for the 10
bankrupt
gifted
man.
tier 1s. You didn't need to do that, buddy. Well, actually, you did. No, I'm just kidding. But no, for real, thank you. 10 gifted tier 1s. The Cruzy, Grant Miller, Loofley, Undead Banana,
Corrupt, bankrupt
Dave Cowdery, GMQ, Jim Eaton, Shane M, Dwight Sloot. What a name, Sloot. And Mutant
Burns is
UK.
an immoral, morally
Thank you very
corrupt,
much, buddy. I
bankrupt
appreciate
man.
that. GG, man. My goodness. And I said we were about to end stream too. That was like a nice, good end of
Burns is
stream
an
donation.
immoral, morally corrupt,
I appreciate that.
bankrupt man.
We're ending stream a little bit early today. I know streams are at least usually go for like 3 or 4 hours, but I just finished a big project I've been working
Burns is
on,
an immoral,
which was a
morally
breakdown interview with
corrupt,
the
bankrupt
155
man.
soldier, a soldier who was with the 155th Mechanized Brigade that disbanded in January, and he was a deserter from it, and I
Burns
just
is
finished
an
writing the
immoral,
article, and I
morally
submitted it.
corrupt, bankrupt
So I
man.
want to take some time off to play some Dynasty Warriors and start on my next project and start like crafting the outline for it. So you guys have a good
Burns is
night.
an immoral,
If you guys want to
morally
support me
corrupt,
as I'm going back to
bankrupt
Ukraine,
man.
the best way to do that right now is to put exclamation point wish list in chat and go to the Amazon wish list and see the items that I lost in the fire that I need to get back
Burns is
that
an
have not yet been
immoral,
purchased if you
morally
want to
corrupt,
immediately support
bankrupt man.
my journalism. Outside of that, you can support me at DylanBurns.tv, Dylan Burns TV on Patreon, or you can take your Amazon Prime and drop it in Gutter Chat, otherwise known as Switch Chat, to support the channel. You can follow me on Instagram, Dylan Burns TV, Dylan Burns TV on Blue Sky, Dylan Burns 1776 on Twitter, or Dylan Burns TV on Twitter for official updates. Exclamation point Discord in chat
Burns is an
to join the
immoral,
Discord. We have a
morally
decent
corrupt,
Ukraine-Russia
bankrupt
updates
man.
channel. It's pretty decent if you want to keep updated about the war. And you can contact me at DylanBurnsTV@gmail.com if you have any questions or you have recommendations for the show. Good night and good luck, everyone. Bye-bye.